geology.com/am. Get on it now.
Description podcast descriptions down there. Podcast is down there. All right, like this from ESPN Stats and Info. This is a chart. You don't need to dive too deep in it, but basically it's the orange line. For those of you who can see it, is Julio's speed, maximum speed on vertical routes over the last 4 years. And for those of you listening on the podcast, the maximum speed is about what it always has been in 17, 18, and 19, and well above the median wide receiver's max speed. But I was listening to Daniel Jeremiah and Bucky Brooks' podcast, and DJ said that he's heard from some people around the league that Julio's GPS numbers have been in decline in the last 3 years.
When do you think we're getting public GPS numbers for us to digest?
I mean, the second that Amazon AWS is ready to sponsor it.
Because I did hear something about the Alabama players with their GPS, and I was like, I haven't read that anywhere. They're like, oh yeah, that's not out. That's not public information. It is. It does matter, because whenever I text my friends asking them questions about skill guys, they typically, and I think inside buildings, it's become a go-to. Like the 40 time is, I'm not saying the 40 time doesn't still matter, but they match that shit up now with the GPS. And I think over the last couple of years, they have learned, and I'm sure talking to the Pac-12 college coaches, how to take the GPS numbers and how to make it into digestible information. Because I think when they first got it, they didn't quite know what to do with it 4 or 5 years ago. Now they can just boom, boom. They can have years to compare it to. Because to me, forever it gets back to Billy Beane, right? And this is where I'm all for analytics. You sit in, he's still playing to his, he just looks like he did in 2014. And then I'm pounding the table, let's go get our guy. And it's like, well, actually, you bring up the numbers. For 7 of his 9 games last year, he was slower than he'd ever been, consistently on 30-plus snaps a game. And to me, when you can do stuff like that, I'm sorry, guy, when you factor in how much you have to pay to acquire him, which is a high draft pick. We were bullshitting out of practice. Biederman just said dropped to 2 and a 4. I think it's fair to say it's going to be more than just a flat 2, potentially. So you factor in that, and then you factor in, like, listen, even a team like the Niners, like, they have cash. It doesn't matter. I'm not saying cap space, like they might have to cut a guy. I'm just saying they'd have no problem paying him the money. It's just more, wait, we're going to give a second-round pick for a guy that's well over 30, who's going to be, if we have him for 2 years, will be 34 when it's all said and done. For a guy that might be trending down, and now we have this hard information, like 1,000,000%, every team that has had these serious discussions, from the Titans to Seattle to the Rams to the Niners to the Colts to the Packers, this GPS number is probably a pretty big conversation, because I've texted a couple executives that I have never heard them mention it. Both of them mentioned it to me in the fall when I asked them about, like, how fast is Trey Lance? They're like, well, looking at the GPS, we guesstimate he's 4.52, right? They talk about, it's become, like, you and I, we don't ever really talk about it. I don't really talk about it. But I think in the league, the last couple of years, it's become like part of the verbiage, part of the landscape.
Is that you don't have to worry, like, we're only talking about game speed when we're talking about GPS, right? We're talking about how fast does he play. I know it's been a point of discussion in college football too. I've talked to multiple coaches, head coaches and assistant coaches in the Pac-12, for example, and outside of the league for that matter, but they know how hard you practice, John. It helps them with player accountability because every player wears a GPS device in their shoulder pads or in their jersey. I guess it's tucked into a little pocket in their jersey in practice. So we know a couple of things. We know, did John try hard today? Like, how hard did he try? We also know John tried really hard. Let's make sure we back John off tomorrow because John worked his ass off today, right? So, like, they're in it every day in practice. It is every day in practice. They know your
Coach,
GPS
I laid it all out on the line.
You cannot hide. It's like, well, John, you were 45th out of 45 in that sprint, and I wasn't even watching. There's no, like, coach had his back turned, so you get to go. You get to go easy because he gets the GPS numbers, so they know how. And they know it's not just about speed. It's about, like, effort output. So, to me, the question is, once you start getting every team can get the same information, right? Or it's not just the Falcons have the proprietary information about their games because that's the device their guys are wearing. But when it's just, Sports View or whatever theirs is called, and everybody can get access to everybody's information, Now, I do think like
Well,
watching
the individual team information for practice, you would never give
you
that
wouldn't
out
get
because you
right,
would never want anyone to know for trades and stuff, right?
right.
The
But
game
also,
stuff, we all have access.
we went to was nobody if they were wearing the GPS today, nobody was maxing out, right, in an NFL practice.
Yeah, no.
But yeah, that's significant. Now I still watch the guy. Like one thing is when I look at the Niners,
Kittle. Every time I looked at Kittle, he was hauling ass.
that's true. Kittle probably did hit. He did red line it. That's a good point. But that's part of what I was thinking about watching them today. You and I were talking about this on the sideline. Is like how many of the Kittles are out there? Trent Williams isn't there. Nick Bosa's not there. So, they look different from just a blue chip NFL star perspective. Now, I'm not saying you should chase stars, but they don't look like the early, like the primo Harbaugh Niners with Navarro and Justin Smith and Patrick Willis and
my pushback on the Julio thing would be I will trust me for business, bring him on in. I'm cool with it. But if I was in their shoes, they kind of just went down that well with Trent Williams, and it's worked out well, pretty well. I mean, we'll see. Actually, it's going to be judged now. Does he play 90% of the games the next 3 years? You're in pretty good shape. Is he a guy that's battling some injuries? Like, it's still unknown. How many superstars who you still think have a lot left in their early 30s do you want to kind of put all your chips in the middle of the table? I'd rather see if I can get, use that free agent money on a younger player potentially. I just think you could easily talk yourself out of this, given that you don't have a lot of picks. If you just were able to get Trey Lance at pick 12, and you said they gave up a second and a fourth, fuck, who cares, right? You got other ones you can maneuver. They just don't have that much maneuverability to add sweet guys. Because we know the other thing with free agency, the pool shrinks every year. Because most times, sweet 26-year-olds aren't just like, check out the free agent class, loaded with dudes. Like, that's not usually the way it works. I would say the best players the last several years that have changed teams have been through quote-unquote free agent trades, right? Jalen Ramsey, Jamal Adams, Stephon Diggs.
DeForest Buckner.
Yeah, dudes in 25 to 28 range, Khalil Mack, that are sweet that change teams, do it with compensation.
DeAndre Hopkins.
Yeah, they aren't just like, can you believe the Cardinals signed DeAndre Hopkins in free agency? No. The Bills, when they broke
Odell
off
Beckham.
Stephon Diggs, even the Cowboys. Like, remember when they signed Amari Cooper? Yeah, with a first-round pick.
Yeah,
Think about all the names we're listing, guy. All these primetime names that I think the Niners would be licking their lips over. Every guy we listed. All of them changed teams via a trade with a first-round pick.
Yeah, we're young.
But they were young. That's
Younger.
my thing.
Yeah.
Like the Niners would essentially be doing the same thing. Listen, would Belichick do this? Like if in his Super Bowl teams, right? Well, first rounder or second rounder for a guy that's 32. To me, you got to factor the age.
Yeah.
Now, he may end up trading for him, but I think he's a little desperate.
Does he? Part of
Non-desperate
this is what
Belichick.
do you have at the position that this person plays? Like for the Niners, if you told me George Kittle and Brandon Ayuk and Deebo Samuel, the three of them each average 15 and a half games, right? So two of them play 16, one of them plays 15, whatever. They're playing the full year.
The Niners would sign a check right now for that.
Yeah, if I told you that, you'd go, we don't, it's like Julio would be, but you don't really need to do that. But that's not, historically, Deebo Samuel doesn't play.
Well, how did Ayuk look out there at practice today? He's injured.
Let me check my notes. They got a lot of receivers out there the Niners have a lot of receivers out there running around. Today at practice, you're right. They got a lot of guys out there running around who are not the guys that they expect to be making plays on Sunday. Juwan Jennings made some plays. Mohamed Sanu made some plays. But those are not, right? So, like, if you're pro Julio based on that, and you would counter the point that I've been making for a month, which is receiver is not the position where you lack the talent. I think the counterpoint to that point that I've made is, well, yeah, that's great today, but if we look at the last 2 years, obviously Ayuk only had the 1 year, but those guys all being healthy, that's not the way it's been. So you're going to make the same mistake again? I understand that point.
They did lose Kendrick Bourne, but I think Kyle would look at it and go, I'm not saying obviously comparing Julio and Kendrick Bourne, but part of having offensive gurus on your, like, that's where you spend a lot of money on with Kyle, with McDaniels, with Welker, I think who's been there in a couple of years now, who I'm sure Kendrick Bourne would tell you all helped him develop as a player. That's where those guys like Juwan Jennings, whoever Juwan Jennings is, it could just be an undrafted free agent that we don't even recognize yet. The Watkins kid whatever, that in 2 years we go, that's what you create a third wide receiver. You have to be able to do stuff like that when you pay your head coach, who's an offensive guy, $10 to $12 million. Like that's
Richie
part
James.
of it.
Did you say Richie
Like
James?
one thing is we talk a lot about Kelsey and Hill. They kind of Sammy Watkins didn't live up to his contract for him, and it didn't matter because they Pringle and Hardiman and just like all these guys, they just develop, right?
Yeah.
Just develop.
Yeah.
I don't know who sour cream and onion Pringle is, but every time I look up, he's hauling ass.
Where'd
Now Hardiman was a third-round pick.
was he from LSU? Where'd he
Pringle
come from? No, McCole Hardman.
Maybe La Tech. I thought he ran really fast. That's all I remember about him coming out. Like really, like 4.32.
Georgia, second rounder.
Second, okay.
56.
Yeah.
Who's this Hardman guy? Oh, second round pick out of the SEC.
But I thought he was third. So my point was that, I mean, they invested in him clearly. But they're like, there's pressure on Hardman. Like, can the guy become like the number 2 now? That it's kind of like is he that guy? I don't know. We're gonna find out. But eventually, like if he's not, he'll kind of get passed, right? Is he just a special teams guy? He's definitely. I'll give Hardiman this. Like you watch the Chiefs, Hardiman's a player.
Yeah,
now, I just don't. Yeah, he's been able to kind of blend in with the other guys. Can he take a solid role? Can he become like a 70, 80 catch guy? Because the Niners need Ayuk and Debo to just establish. Can you guys both become 75 catch guys?
Right.
Both of you.
Hardman, 26 catches to 41 catches. Those were his first 2 years. So is he?
Do you think it's unrealistic to think Hardiman's got a 68 catch season?
No.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, it's like.
Well, can Juwan Jennings give him 32 catches this year?
Well, John, if you told me Juwan Jennings was active for half the season, I'd say that's a pretty big success. Let alone.
But there is going to be, and it might not. It might be a guy that we don't. It might be the 4th undrafted free agent that we haven't even brought up yet. There is going to be a guy that we do not know that has 32 catches on.
Yeah, but that could be Richie James, and you'd go, we do know who that is.
Okay, yeah, but yeah, that's fair. I forgot about him.
No, but I mean, you're right. It could be Juwan Jennings.